Hey, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Coming to Believe in the God Who Restores Us. We've been talking a lot about the children of Israel coming into the promised land by faith and some of the struggles that they came up against in terms of the bad report versus the good report. And we talked about how as they came out of that land of bondage and God was trying to bring them into the land of promise and freedom, some of them began to come up against their own personal doubts. We talked about how the 10 spies who gave the bad report were not looked upon favorably by the scriptures, and the two spies, Joshua and Caleb, who gave a good report, who said, "We believe God's promise that the land is ours and that we can take it." It wasn't them declaring their own thoughts. It was them agreeing with God's thought that God says, "I'm pleased with these two, with Joshua and Caleb." And today I want to really talk about the consequential nature of whether or not we trust God's promises, declare God's promises, or we doubt God's promises and give the bad report. Listen, if we find ourselves in the same mindset and speaking the same disrespect and doubt as the 10 spies, then we're going to find the same consequences in our life. And you know, something really scary happened after these 10 spies came back bearing a report that did not agree with the promises of God. It began to infect others around them. And as a result, it began to foster rebellion among the people. It began to foster a grumbling spirit among the people. And when this took place, God began to say, "Listen, it's time for me to bring discipline. It's time for me to bring consequences, because I've told you, you can enter the land, and I've commanded you to do so. And you've said back to me, I cannot enter the land and I will not enter the land." And as a result, these Israelites who were persuaded by the 10 doubting spies became condemned to a lifetime of wandering in the wilderness. And that's a scary thing, because this is what happens when we decide to reject God's goodness, which is extended to us in our life. We begin to wander throughout our life in a place of misery, in a place of bondage. They were in slavery in Egypt, and they find themselves now in even deeper bondage in the wilderness. Why? Because the God that led them out of slavery was the same God that was going to lead them into freedom. And they left Egypt by faith, but they would not use that same faith to enter into the promised land. And we find 40 years later, after all of these doubters have finally passed away, that Joshua and Caleb can now team up and lead the new generation into God's promises. And here's the warning for us, that today, if we hear His voice, we should not harden our hearts as they did in the wilderness. That's what the book of Hebrews says. And when we respond to God positively in faith, there are so many blessings. Joshua and Caleb were able to experience such supernatural, miraculous joy in their life as a result. But the others who doubted and rebelled, they did not get to experience the freedom that came from entering the promised land. And I hope that that'll bless you today, and that you will begin to say, you know what? I need to put away from my mouth those things that I'm speaking and saying that are not consistent with God's word. But you can't know that if you're not getting in His word daily. So that's my encouragement. I'm looking forward to getting into more on this topic in our next devotional. God bless.